They said she was just a cleaner. A nobody. Until one powerful man made her kneel and beg. Cut to a boardroom, a man in a suit smirking, his hand resting on the table. Raymond, coldly? Kneel and beg. Then maybe I'll help your dying mother. Camera pans to the woman's tear-streaked face, her eyes steady, unbroken. But instead of tears, she gave him words that shattered his pride and changed both their lives forever. Beat of silence. Fade to title screen. Kneel and beg, but her next words changed everything. This is Raw Tales Stories, where pride falls and truth stands tall. The morning sun crept slowly over the city skyline, painting gold across the tall glass buildings that belonged to people like him. And far below, in the narrow streets where dreams often got stepped on, Amara walked briskly, her shoes worn, her bag heavier than her spirit. She was late again. Her shift at the Silver Crown Hotel started at 6 a.m., and being late meant deductions, something she could no longer afford. Her mother's hospital bills had grown higher than her hopes. Every night she prayed that something, anything, would change. But fate, as she would soon learn, has its own way of testing faith. Amara rushed into the lobby, breathless, clutching her cleaning supplies. The marble floors gleamed like mirrors, and her reflection stared back, tired eyes, determined face. She straightened her uniform, whispered a silent prayer, and started scrubbing near the front desk. That's when she heard laughter. A group of executives passed, their suits crisp, their voices arrogant. "Is that the cleaner who keeps asking HR for advance pay?" One of them snickered. "Yeah," another replied. "She's always begging for money. Pathetic." Amara lowered her eyes and kept working. Words hurt, but she had learned to let them bounce off her silence. What she didn't know was that someone else was watching, Raymond Holt, the company's youngest vice president. A man known for his ruthless drive and colder heart. Later that morning, Amara was called to clean his office. It was her least favorite task, not because the office was messy, but because Raymond was the kind of man who made silence feel like punishment. She knocked softly. "Sir? May I come in?" He didn't answer. Just stared at his laptop. "Sir?" He cut her off. "Do you ever get tired of being late, miss?" He checked her badge. "Miss Nwosu?" "I'm sorry, sir," she said softly. "There was traffic and—" "Excuses," he muttered. "Always excuses." She bowed slightly. "It won't happen again." He sighed, then looked up, not at her, but through her. "You're the one who sent a request to HR for financial aid, right?" Her heart stopped. "Yes, sir. My mother, she's sick. I only asked for—" He leaned back, smirking. "Do you know how many employees here have sick mothers, Miss Nwosu? Why should I help you?" Amara bit her lip, fighting back tears. "Because I'll pay back, sir. I just need a little time." He stood up, walking slowly around his desk, his polished shoes echoing on the floor. "Time," he repeated. "You people always want time. But tell me—" He stopped in front of her. "What are you willing to do for it?" Her stomach tightened. "Sir?" He smiled, not kindly. "Kneel," he said coldly. "Kneel and beg." The words hit her like a slap. Amara froze, her mind spinning. He wasn't joking. His eyes held no humor. "I'm serious," he continued. "If you want my help, show me how desperate you are." She looked at the floor, then at him. The same man who had power over her paycheck, her job, and her mother's treatment. Her hands trembled. Every instinct screamed to walk away. But her mother's face, weak, smiling from the hospital bed, flashed before her eyes. And so, she sank slowly to her knees. The office was silent except for her breath, unsteady, breaking. "Please," she whispered. "Please, sir. I just need a chance." Raymond's smirk widened. "That's better." He reached into his drawer and pulled out an envelope. "Here's some cash. Don't say I never helped you." He dropped it on the floor in front of her. Like she was an animal. Amara stared at it, and then at him. Something inside her shifted, a quiet fury rising through the humiliation. She slowly picked up the envelope, stood to her feet, and locked eyes with him. Then, in a calm, steady voice, she said, "You may have money, sir, but you'll never understand worth. One day, you'll see what I mean." And she walked out, leaving the envelope on his desk. Outside the office, her legs shook. She could still hear his laughter behind her. But in her heart something had changed, the moment she chose dignity over desperation. That day, Amara made a silent promise. She would never kneel again. Not for pity. Not for power. Not for anyone. What she didn't know was that this act of quiet rebellion would set off a chain of events that would turn her life upside down and put Raymond Holt at her mercy. Days passed after the humiliation in Raymond Holt's office. For Amara, every second replayed in her mind the sting of his voice, the disgust in his smirk, the sound of his laughter as she walked out with nothing but her pride intact. She tried to bury it under work, to lose herself in the rhythmic scraping of mops and the smell of disinfectant. But dignity, once bruised, does not heal quietly. In the staff break room, whispers followed her like shadows. "That's her. The cleaner who tried to borrow from the VP. He told her to kneel, didn't he? I heard she did it." Each whisper cut deeper than the last, but Amara kept her head high. She had decided she wouldn't respond with words anymore. She would respond with action. One rainy morning, Amara came in early, as usual. The hotel lobby was empty except for the echo of water dripping from umbrellas. The power had flickered overnight, and the staff IT team was struggling to fix the system, a mix-up that delayed guest check-ins. As Amara mopped the floor near the reception, she overheard the IT assistant complain. "If only I could reset the database properly, it's like everything's jammed." Amara hesitated. I might help," she said softly. The assistant blinked. Your housekeeping." She nodded nervously. "I studied computer science before I had to drop out. I think I can help." The man shrugged, desperate. "Fine. Be my guest." Amara knelt beside the computer, fingers moving swiftly over the keyboard. Within minutes, she located the glitch, reconnected the server, and restored the hotel system. The assistant stared in shock. "How did you?" "I used to fix systems like this in school," she said, smiling faintly. Before he could reply, the manager walked in, just as the computers beeped back to life. "What just happened?" he asked. "She fixed it," the assistant said, pointing at Amara. The manager frowned, half impressed, half skeptical. "You? The cleaner?" Amara wiped her hands on her uniform and said quietly, "Just lucky, sir." But luck had nothing to do with it. It was skill, buried beneath years of survival. Later that day, Raymond called an emergency meeting with the department heads. His tone was clipped, his expression unreadable. "I want to know why our systems went down this morning," he said. "We can't afford technical embarrassment in front of our VIP guests." The IT assistant explained the issue, and how Amara had fixed it. At first, the room went silent. Then Raymond laughed, a short, mocking sound. "You're telling me a cleaner fixed a network system you couldn't handle?" The assistant nodded hesitantly. "Yes, sir. She seemed to know exactly what she was doing." Raymond leaned back, his jaw tightening. "Interesting. Maybe I should have her clean my servers next time." The room chuckled softly, everyone except the assistant, who looked uncomfortable. But in Raymond's eyes something dark flickered. Not amusement, resentment. That night, as Amara prepared to leave, she found Raymond waiting by the lobby entrance. "Leaving so soon?" he asked casually. She hesitated. "My shift's over, sir." He smiled, but there was something sharp in it. "You've been quite the topic today. Fixing systems now, are we?" "I just helped," she replied carefully. He stepped closer. "You like helping people, don't you, Miss Nwosu?" She didn't answer. He handed her a business card. "Meet me in my office tomorrow morning. I have an opportunity for you." Her stomach turned. What kind of opportunity? He smiled again. A better paying one, if you're willing to be flexible. His tone left no room for misunderstanding. She looked down at the card, then back at him. I'll think about it, she said, slipping it into her pocket. Good, he said, turning to leave. Think carefully. You don't want to regret it. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. The words replayed over and over. Be flexible. She knew what he wanted, and she also knew what she wanted: respect, not pity. By dawn, her decision was made. When she walked into Raymond's office the next morning, his smirk returned. You came, he said. Smart girl. She placed his business card on the desk. I came to give this back, she said firmly. And to tell you something. He raised an eyebrow. Go on. She looked him dead in the eye. I won't sell my dignity for an opportunity. I'd rather earn it. The smile vanished from his face. Careful, he said slowly. You might be walking yourself out of a job. Then I'll walk out with my head up, she replied. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then he chuckled bitterly. You really don't know how this world works, do you? Maybe not, she said, turning to leave. But I know how I work, with honesty. And she walked out again. For the second time, she left him speechless. By the end of that week, something unexpected happened. A senior guest from another company, a wealthy investor named Mr. Clark, noticed Amara's work ethic and kind spirit. He watched her clean a spilled drink without complaint, help a lost tourist with directions, and treat everyone, from bellboys to board members, with the same respect. Who's that young woman? He asked the hotel manager. That's Amara, the manager said. Housekeeping. Hardworking, but complicated history. Mr. Clark smiled faintly. I see something in her. Tell her I'd like to speak with her tomorrow. That night, as Amara sat on her bed counting coins for her mother's medication, she had no idea that fate had finally begun to turn in her favor. Because the man she would meet the next day wasn't just another guest, he was a billionaire investor. And the one person who could rewrite her destiny. Morning came slowly, golden light slipping through thin curtains as the city woke to another day of rush and routine. But for Amara, this morning felt different. She stood before the mirror in her tiny apartment, smoothing the creases from her uniform, whispering to herself. Today is not just another day. Today, something changes. Her heart still carried the sting of Raymond Holt's insults, but she wore her pain like armor now, silent, steady, unbreakable. At 9 a.m., the hotel lobby buzzed with activity. Executives passed in polished suits. Guests sipped coffee beneath chandeliers. And there stood Amara, clutching her cleaning kit, trying to calm her nerves. The manager approached her with a raised brow. Mr. Clark would like to see you in the VIP lounge, he said. Amara blinked. Me? Are you sure? He frowned slightly. He insisted. She followed him, her palms damp with nerves. Inside the lounge sat a white-haired man in his late 60s, calm eyes, kind smile. Mr. Thomas Clark, one of the most respected investors in the city. When Amara entered, he gestured to the seat across from him. Please sit. She hesitated. Sir, I'm just... He interrupted gently. You're Amara, the woman who fixed the hotel system last week, correct? Her eyes widened. Yes, sir, but that was just luck. He smiled. I don't believe in luck. I believe in preparation meeting opportunity. And you, my dear, are prepared. She didn't know what to say. I watched you this week, he continued. You treat people with kindness, even when they don't return it. That's rare. Her throat tightened. Thank you, sir. Then he leaned forward, lowering his voice. I'm looking for people with integrity to join my new project, a small tech-based foundation that helps train underprivileged youth. I need someone I can trust to manage part of it. Amara's eyes widened. Me? But I'm not qualified. He smiled softly. You're more qualified than you think. Sometimes, experience isn't found in offices. It's built in struggle. For the first time in years, Amara felt seen, not as a cleaner, but as a person. Think about it, Mr. Clark said, standing up. I'll have my assistant call you tomorrow. Oh, and one more thing. He paused by the door. Don't let small men make you feel smaller. Some people only stand tall because they're standing on others. She smiled through tears. Thank you, sir. That evening, as Amara walked home through the dimly lit streets, she replayed every word Mr. Clark had said. Her heart raced with a mix of disbelief and gratitude. She stopped by her mother's hospital room, smiling as she saw her asleep. Mom, she whispered softly, brushing her hair aside. Things are finally changing. A nurse nearby smiled knowingly. You always bring light when you visit. She'll get better soon. Amara nodded, though her eyes glistened. I hope so. The next day, as she prepared to leave for another long shift, her phone buzzed, a call from an unknown number. Hello? Amara Nwosu? Yes, sir. This is Mr. Clark's office. He'd like you to come by for a meeting this afternoon, to discuss your role. Her heart nearly leaped out of her chest. I'll be there. At work, she moved faster than usual, humming softly. Even the whispers of gossip couldn't touch her today. But fate, as always, had a way of testing her peace. Raymond saw her walking through the lobby with a bright smile. His eyes narrowed. What are you so happy about? He asked, blocking her path. Just having a good day, sir, she said politely. He smirked. Good? After everything I said? You're a stubborn one, aren't you? She kept her voice calm. I just believe what's mine will come to me, sir. Eventually. His jaw clenched. Be careful, Miss Nwosu. People like you don't get second chances. She met his gaze. Then I'll make my own. He scoffed. You think you can defy me and still work here? I don't think, she said softly. I know. And she walked away, again, leaving him in silence. For the first time, he felt powerless. At 2 p.m., Amara stood outside Mr. Clark's corporate office, a tall building that gleamed with success. She wore her cleanest outfit, a plain white blouse and black skirt. Her hands trembled as she pushed the door open. The receptionist smiled. Mr. Clark is expecting you. Inside, he greeted her warmly. You came, he said. Good. He handed her a folder. This outlines the Foundation's mission, to create computer literacy programs for low-income communities. I want you to help design the first training center. Amara blinked, stunned. Me? But I'm just a cleaner. Not anymore, he interrupted gently. You're someone who refused to kneel. Tears welled in her eyes. I see something powerful in you, he continued. And I believe the world will too, one day. Amara took the folder, her hands shaking. Thank you, sir. I won't disappoint you. You already haven't, he said. That night, Amara stood on the rooftop of her apartment building, watching the sunset spill across the city. For the first time in years, she felt free from shame, from fear, from the weight of survival. The girl who had once knelt in humiliation was now being lifted by grace and purpose. She looked at her reflection in the window, tired, but glowing with new strength. And she whispered, almost to herself, You were right, Mama. What's meant for me will always find me. Far below, the lights of the hotel shimmered. Inside, Raymond Holt sat in his office, restless, his thoughts haunted by the woman who refused to break. He didn't know it yet, but the balance of power had already begun to shift. And soon, he would find himself on his knees, begging not for forgiveness, but for mercy. The night felt heavier than any before. Rain tapped softly against the window of Sarah's small apartment, while her heart raced with what tomorrow would bring. She sat before her mirror, staring at her reflection, bruised but not broken. Her mother's bracelet still hung on her wrist, the last gift before the accident. She whispered, Mama, tomorrow, he'll finally hear me. Across town, Mr. Rowland sat in his luxury home, pacing the marble floor. His lawyer had warned him the case was gaining attention, journalists wanted to attend, and whispers of corruption were already spreading online. He poured himself a drink, muttering, "She's just a girl from nowhere. She doesn't stand a chance." But deep down, a flicker of fear crossed his mind, because something about Sarah's calm defiance the last time they met haunted him. The courthouse steps were crowded. Reporters, cameras, and onlookers stood shoulder to shoulder as Sarah walked up the stairs in a simple white dress. She looked nothing like the poor orphan they mocked her as. Her head was held high, her lawyer beside her, and her eyes never left the doors ahead. Inside, Mr. Rowland's team tried to intimidate her, laughter, loud whispers, but she stayed silent. Every sound, every word, reminded her why she was here. The judge entered. The murmurs stopped. And when Sarah took the stand, her voice didn't shake. "They said I should kneel and beg," she began. "But I didn't. Because begging doesn't bring justice, truth does." Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras clicked. Sarah's lawyer brought out the files she'd kept hidden, proof of the illegal land grab, voice recordings of Mr. Rowland's threats, and photos showing the injuries she sustained that day. The room went silent. Then came the part no one expected. A man stood from the back, an investigator from the Federal Bureau. "Your Honor," he said, "we've been tracking Mr. Rowland's company for months. This young woman's courage helped us connect the dots. We have every transaction, every document." Rowland's face went pale. His lawyer dropped his pen. The judge's voice was sharp. "Mr. Rowland, are these allegations true?" Rowland could barely breathe. This is a setup." But everyone could see the truth had already unfolded. As Rowland's world began to crumble, Sarah looked straight at him. "You told me to kneel," she said softly. "Do you still want that?" Rowland, trembling, looked around. The cameras were rolling. His name, his reputation, gone. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. The judge called for order, but everyone had already seen enough. The arrogance, the cruelty, all of it stood exposed. Sarah turned to the judge and bowed respectfully. "I don't need him punished," she said. "I just want him to know what it feels like to lose everything he used to destroy others." Her grace silenced the room. Rowland was sentenced to years in prison, but Sarah didn't celebrate. She left the courthouse quietly, her steps light but her heart still heavy. The rain started again, the same rain from that first night. Outside, reporters surrounded her, asking, "How do you feel after winning?" She paused. "This isn't about winning," she said. "It's about standing." And she walked away, past the flashing cameras, past the chaos, carrying nothing but her truth. Weeks later, Sarah started a foundation for young women who had been bullied, silenced, or abused by those in power. The first words on the foundation's banner read, "Never kneel for cruelty. Stand for truth." Her story spread worldwide. And somewhere in a prison cell, Rowland sat watching the news, his eyes full of regret, realizing too late that the woman he told to kneel and beg was stronger than he'd ever imagined. Months had passed since the trial. Sarah had become a name whispered with admiration across the country. Newspapers called her the girl who stood tall. Schools invited her to speak about courage. On the outside, it seemed like she'd moved on, but deep down, the pain hadn't fully healed. One evening, she sat in her office at the Rising Truth Foundation, staring at a stack of letters from young women thanking her. Her assistant, Lydia, walked in. "Sarah, they want you on national television next week. Everyone's talking about your story again." Sarah smiled faintly. "If only they knew, courage doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep walking anyway." The rain tapped gently on the window again, that same haunting rhythm from the day everything began. Scene 2, a letter from prison. One morning, a guard arrived at her office with an envelope marked State Correctional Facility. Her hands froze. She knew exactly who it was from. It read, "Sarah, you may never forgive me, but I owe you the truth. When I told you to kneel, I thought I was powerful. But when you stood, You showed me what real power was. Every night in this cell, I remember that day. I don't ask for pity, only that you never stop standing tall. Roland. She closed the letter and sighed. For the first time in years, her anger loosened. She whispered, You finally learned what kneeling means. Sarah decided to visit the prison, not to gloat, but to end her story her own way. When she entered the visitors' hall, Roland looked completely different, thinner, older, humbled. The arrogance was gone. They sat across the table, separated by glass. I didn't think you'd come, he said softly. I didn't think you'd change, she replied. He nodded slowly. You were right that day. Power isn't control. It's conscience. Sarah smiled, not out of revenge, but peace. Then maybe you finally found something worth kneeling for. Roland lowered his head. I already have. The guard called time, but something in that short conversation closed the chapter that had haunted them both. Months later, Sarah stood on a grand stage at a global women's conference. Thousands of people filled the hall. Cameras flashed. She began her speech with a single sentence. Once, a man told me to kneel and beg. But what he didn't know was that I was born to stand. The crowd erupted in applause. She continued. If someone tells you that you are weak, remember, you are only weak if you forget your worth. I knelt that day not to beg, but to rise stronger. And today, I stand for every girl who was ever told to stay silent. Tears filled many eyes in the audience. The message struck deep. Her pain had become power. Back in the prison, Roland watched the speech on a small television. He didn't turn it off. He didn't look away. When the crowd stood and clapped for her, he smiled faintly, a smile of acceptance. He whispered to another inmate. She was right. She always was. That night, he wrote his final letter to her foundation, a donation from his seized assets, meant to support victims of abuse. It was his way of giving back what he had stolen. 1 year later, Sarah stood before a new building, the Roland Center for Rehabilitation and Justice. It wasn't just for victims. It was also for reforming offenders. Teach. Lydia asked. You named it after him? Sarah nodded. Because sometimes, the lesson means more than the pain. Forgiveness doesn't make you weak, it proves you survived stronger. They walked through the hallways where young women learned self-defense, legal rights, and leadership. Every step echoed strength, not sorrow. At sunset, Sarah returned to the same riverbank where it all started, where she had once been told to kneel. She stood there now, hands in her pockets, watching the water shimmer under the fading light. Softly, she whispered, You told me to kneel and beg, and I did kneel, but only before God, not you. And look where standing took me. A breeze lifted her hair as the screen fades to black. Sometimes, life's cruelest words become the seed of your greatest strength. She was told to kneel, and from that moment she rose higher than anyone ever imagined. This is Raw Tales Stories, where the broken rise, and karma remembers every name.